Breaking news out of the NFL, Chris Grier is out as the Dolphins general manager. Grier has been with the Dolphins since 2000, taking over as GM in 2016. During his tenure as the general manager, the Dolphins have not won a single playoff game. Grier oversaw the hiring of 3 head coaches in Adam Gase, Brian Flores, and Mike McDaniel. The first 2 were fired after just 3 seasons under the helm. Miami has the longest active playoff win drought in the NFL. Their last postseason win came in 2000. Statements coming out from Dolphins owner Stephen Ross. He had this to say: "As I assessed the state of the team and in my discussions with Chris, it became clear to both of us that change could not wait. We must improve in 2025, 2026, and beyond, and it needs to start right now." We started our conversation by bringing in our GM, Rand Carthon. And Rand, I know you're not like a huge fan of firing a coach in the middle of a season, but you look at this situation in Miami. We saw the brown paper bags over the fans' faces last night in their game against the Ravens. Does this situation make sense for you to make that change in the front office right now in the middle of the year?
I mean, Zach, we've been working with each other for, a couple months now, and you said it, like, I'm just not a fan of it. And particularly as it pertains to the GM, like, how much are things going to change right now, right? In terms of player acquisition, you're saying that, and just based off the statement that change needs to start in 2025 and it needs to continue into 2026. Well, how are you going to improve this Dolphins roster at this point? We're basically in November. How are you going to improve the roster? You're not going to make wholesale changes in terms of trading for a litany of people that's going to come in and improve your roster. And so I don't understand what the firing of a GM does for you in the middle of the season, because it's kind of, the season has been what it's going to be so far. And so, even when we led in to hearing, the details of Chris Grier's history in Miami, and saying that he oversaw 3 head coaching hirings, we got to remember that when Chris was first named GM in Miami, Mike Tannenbaum was above him in the executive vice president role, and so Chris wasn't necessarily running the operation as the general manager. And it wasn't until Mike Tannenbaum moved on in which Chris became, the full-time football czar, if you will.
So then, when you see the situation in Miami and you hear what the owner Stephen Ross says about wanting to start getting better right now, what is the right solution? Should they have kept Chris Grier to let him make some trades, or do you think Grier might not have wanted to make certain deals and certain moves? Like, how do you operate in this space with how they've been playing?
It's just a bad situation altogether to be in, right? Because your record is what it is. They're 2-7 on the season right now. And so what changes can you make at the deadline that's not going to sacrifice your future to continue to build? And right now, there aren't any moves that you can make that is going to turn this team around and allow them to, win 10 games at this point, win 8 in a row. Like, that's not going to happen. And so it's one of those situations, again, like, where are you going? Because right now you can't hire another GM until, you've gone through the full length of the interview process, which likely won't take shape until the end of the season. And so now you put yourself in a position, if you're Stephen Ross, if you're the Dolphins organization, just in terms of how desirable will this job be based off of how things have been handled. And now, granted, I'll say, you always say, who's going to want a job, right? But there's only 32 of these things, and there are so many ambitious people that will take a job just because they want to, achieve a goal. So it's one of those things that we're going to have to continue to monitor, just in terms of how this job is going to be viewed and how this job will ultimately take shape. But to answer your question, I don't know that there's anything right now the Dolphins organization can do that's going to improve this team wholeheartedly and make them into a playoff contender at this point.
One thing that it seems they are at least doing for now, according to ESPN, is they're going to hold on to Mike McDaniel, and he will stay on as the head coach for the rest of the season. You hear that news. Is that the right decision?
Yeah, regardless of what you feel about Mike McDaniels as the head coach, I've said it numerous times, whether it's with us on the Morning Buzz or with our game day recap show. Again, firing the head coach is, what does it do? It's not going to ultimately reignite you and all of a sudden you're going to have this great turnaround. But then you also got to look at the staff and ask who on the staff would be the interim head coach. And so those are all things that you have to answer throughout the course of making these decisions. And so I don't understand where that's going to where that would take it, because now you're looking at it as you're firing the GM and you're firing the head coach, and you're walking them into a situation where you got an interim head coach, interim GM, and they're trying to make all these things happen, and everything happens so fast in these roles that it would just be completely unfair to not only players but the Dolphins organization as a whole.
I'm just so curious right here, because if as an owner you decide to fire the GM but to keep the head coach, like, what sense can you make of that, of how you choose which one to keep and who to not keep for the present right here?
Yeah, again, those are tough decisions, and that's actually a great question, Zach, and I'd be interested to hear, the Dolphins fan base and what they think about that, because, again, at this point, when you're the GM, right, there's only so many changes that you can make at this point of the season that is going to do anything to truly affect the roster, because at this point it becomes about the coaches, it becomes about the players and what they have to do. Now, there are going to be teams, and we've seen teams to this point, that make moves, but they're one move here, one move there, just in terms of shoring up their roster or getting that one piece. You typically see teams at the trade deadline, they make a trade because they feel they are one or two pieces away from getting over that hump or being in contention. But when you're a Dolphins team that is 2-7, you're not just one player away. So again, that option for you to have to make that one trade that's going to lift your program is just not there for you. And so again, that's why I question why fire the GM at this point. To me right now, it should have been a situation where, regardless of how the season has gone, that you steady the ship, you right the ship until the end of the season, and then throughout the course, you can now work behind the scenes to kind of figure out what direction you want to go in.
So let's look at that roster of Miami, and I hope that folks will tune into the Morning Buzz, especially on Mondays, 9 a.m., because we have a lot of fun over there, and you've in the past called some people to the congregation and called them to the front of the church, and you've had some words you've had to say towards them. In this situation, we're looking at Tua Tagovailoa right now. What do you think this means for the future of him, knowing he has that money, knowing that, okay, at least Mike McDaniel will be here for the rest of the year? We don't know after that, but we do know that a new GM will be coming in.
So that would be one of the big things in terms of when this new GM is hired, and that will be the number one question that all GMs will ask in their interview is, where does the organization stand with Tua? They're going to come in with their own evaluation of Tua and whether they want to keep him or want to move on from him. And if they do want to move on from him, how much freedom will they have to be able to move on from him? Because you also got to think about the dead cap hit that they would take, and if the organization is even willing to take that dead cap hit. And so those are going to be the big conversations just in terms of the GM interview as to how much freedom and how much power and control will the next GM or head coach, if you will, have to be able to make a decision on Tua Tagovailoa and his future.
Our GM, Rand Carthon, so glad you're on our team. Can't wait to see you in person down here on Monday. Make sure you pop up and watch him on Sunday as well. Stay tapped into everything going on around on HQ. Speaking of Sunday afternoon window before those games start, NFL Today, they will be on the road this Sunday over in Buffalo, getting ready for the Chiefs and the Bills. Make sure you tap in with the whole crew led by JB. That's on CBS and streaming also on Paramount+.